the Digital Office Systems Cybersecurity Insurance webinar. We'll go ahead and get started here. Just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items first. So first off, this is a webinar, and we're planning on holding out all questions and answers until the end. But within the Zoom control, you should be able to see a Q&A button that you can click on. So please feel free to start putting in any questions that you have as they pop up. But just know we are going to hold any sort of answers until the end. So we'll have a time dedicated just to address that. Real quickly, what we're going to look at, I want to introduce myself, as well as we have two speakers that will be attending with us. One speaker is focused directly on cybersecurity and is a cybersecurity professional. We also have another one that is in the insurance world. So we brought the best of both worlds into this webinar to help give you guys the best information that's possible. So what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at the cybersecurity threat landscape and regulatory, address some of the risks that are going to be involved with businesses such as yours. And then we'll also talk about the cyber insurance requirements, what the application looks like, what are some of the things that you guys really need to know and understand about a cyber insurance policy. So that way you can make sure you're getting the right coverage for your business. And then again, after that, we'll go through any Q&As from there. So go ahead to the next one here. So first off, I'm John Ash. I do work at Digital Office Systems, or DOS. I've been here for 9 years, and I'm the primary virtual chief information officer, or VCIO. And so my main role is to help align technology with business strategy for all of our existing customers, helping them understand where they're at, what challenges they should be facing, or what they're looking at from a cybersecurity standpoint, and help align those technologies with them. So I'm a glorified consultant, if you will, for IT services. And when I'm not at work, I enjoy spending time with my fiance. Yes, somebody is willing to marry me, and the 3 dogs that I have as well. And I do a lot of home improvement projects. We also have Natalie Suarez, who will be joining as well. She is with one of our partners, ConnectWise. She has been in the cybersecurity world or the IT world for 25 years. And she currently is a cybersecurity professional and resides in Tampa, Florida. We also have Chris Conradi, who's joining with us. He is with Conradi Insurance Group, has been there since 2009 and is the current president of the agency since 2002. He's worked a lot within cyber insurance, and so he'll be able to talk along the cyber insurance policies, the cyber insurance application, and some things that you guys should need to know. Chris also likes spending time with his family and 2 kids. So first off, we'll go ahead and start here. A little bit about us. We've been in the industry since 2001. We started off as a copier printer sales and service company, and we've been doing that successfully here in Wichita and the 9 surrounding counties since 2001. 9 years ago, I came on board and we started exploring into managed IT services. It was a natural transition for us, and since then we've helped grow our business, and now we also support cybersecurity best practices, data backups, cloud hosting, and software solutions to help optimize business processes. So really, when people think of Digital Office Systems, we want you to think of us as a technology company that can help address any technology needs that you need, and a trusted advisor. Go ahead to the next one here. And so Gartner coined this cybersecurity definition here recently. Cybersecurity is a body of technology, processes, and practices, handheld and other internet-connected devices, so forth and so forth. But going to the next slide, I really think a better definition is cybersecurity is really about managing risk. And this is where I'm going to pass it off to Natalie and let her talk a little bit more on that side of it.
Hello, everyone. So, I think Gartner got part of it right. Definitely, we're talking about processes and technology, but really, we're in the business of cybersecurity. We understand you are not in the business of cybersecurity. So really, it's all about managing your risk. So we understand that it only makes sense for you to deploy solutions and processes and security awareness training, except as it makes sense to the extent for your business, because we do want to reduce your risk. Next. So these are some of the challenges we see for the small to medium-sized business market. You tend to think of cybersecurity as an IT challenge, and we really want you to stretch your thinking here and really think of it more as a business challenge. It's really all about what risk level are you willing to accept to protect your most valuable assets, your data, your client information. We understand it's not your first thought at the beginning of the day is my cybersecurity. You have competing priorities. You're in business for a certain reason. Well, first of all, you're in business to make money. So you want to protect yourself and you want to minimize that risk so you don't lose money. And you're not going to be thinking cybersecurity forefront. That's why you want to partner with someone like Digital Office Systems as your trusted advisor who can help you make those cybersecurity decisions. We understand a lot of you, and we're dealing with this too, the complexity of shifting to a remote workforce. There's new challenges that come out when you have to deal with employees that aren't necessarily in the office 100% of the time. Maybe you don't have anyone on staff that has any cyber knowledge or cyber skills. Maybe you don't have a well thought out BCDR, or business continuity and disaster recovery plan, which not only includes backup and cybersecurity, but what about natural disasters? Here in Florida, we have to consider hurricanes when we're talking about our disaster recovery plans. And we all know with inflation, the increased cost of everything. So therefore, if you do have some type of incident, the cost to respond and recover are going to be much higher than they used to be. And that's why we're bringing you this webinar so we could tell you about some of the ways how you can mitigate those costs. Global legislation. Did you realize that privacy legislation is not based on the location where your business is? It's actually based on the location of where your clients or customers are located. So if you have customers in a state like Utah or California, outside of your local region, you have to abide by their privacy laws. Even the United States is now proposing new privacy legislation every day, not only for critical infrastructure like financial and health and utilities and things like that, but for everyday businesses. Cyber warfare. I was listening to a really interesting podcast the other day, and they were talking about repatriation after a war is over. Well, repatriation is pretty much a checkbox when you're talking about disarming a soldier, making sure you get all the equipment back. Look around the world what happens when armies aren't repatriated correctly and put back into society. You know, maybe they become guerrillas. But what happens now? Now we have a war in Ukraine and Russia that's not only kinetic, it's involving a true cyber component. What happens when this war is over, because all wars eventually end, if we don't properly repatriate those cyber warriors? Just think about that for a moment. Reputation damage. The reputation damage to a business is kind of hard to judge your ROI, but let me give you one quick stat. Small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, over 60% of them that have an incident or a breach is a legal term, are out of business within 6 months. Okay, go to the next slide, please. So these are just some news stories that I brought out to bring top of mind. Cybercrime. Cyber criminals is not like in the good old days when I started my career. Actually, in the good old days, you had to have network knowledge, you had to understand system architectures, you had to be a software developer to be a bad guy. That is just no longer the case. There is a thriving ecosystem of bad guys who now offer their services to anyone who can access the dark web. And let me tell you who can access the dark web. Anyone who wants to. Very easy. You can go to the internet right now. You can download something called the Onion Router. It's a Tor, what they call a Tor browser, and you can access the dark web. And you can buy anything your heart desires, including phishing as a service, ransomware as a service, and they are true enterprises. They have help desks. They produce videos for help. They have payment processing centers. And anyone who wants to spend some cryptocurrency can now be a bad guy with the full support of huge ransomware gangs like Lockbit, Hive, Clop, etc. I could have an entire presentation just on this one thing. Look here, you may see some large corporations that have been hacked. Why should you care? Well, you should care. Facebook is hacked because I bet you have employees. I bet you may have owners of corporations or businesses there that are using their corporate email address and that same password that they use to access that infrastructure to access Facebook or non-reputable sites like TikTok, Temu, Shein. All of these sites sell your data to the Chinese government. Amazon, I'm not saying Amazon sells to the Chinese government. What I'm saying about Amazon is Amazon's been involved in many breaches. Facebook's been involved in many breaches. Ring has been involved in many breaches. Look at the Move It breach. We're up to over 20 million individuals affected by that Move It breach. If you want to talk more about that, pop something in the Q&A. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. There's lots of threat vectors. And what happens is these bad guys, they don't manually attack you. They buy these credentials that have been harvested through these hacks, and they do something that we call a spray and pray, which means they literally spray out a huge net and see who they catch. And they automatically try those usernames and credentials everywhere they can think of, including your business. ChatGPT, AI has really changed the cyber threat landscape. So ChatGPT can be used to write malware, even the one that is not supposed to write bad things. I personally went into ChatGPT, typed in, I am creating a security awareness training all around phishing, and I need to see some example phishing emails. I was able to generate 4 awesome phishing emails within less than 2 minutes. And while I can't go in there and say, hey, I want to attack somebody, create a phishing email, or I want to attack somebody, create a malware for me, I can go in and say things like, I'm creating security awareness training. I can go in and say things like, hey, can you tell me how to use the APIs to access the Amazon S3 buckets, which is a data store, if anyone's not aware. I can build parts of it by using AI. AI can also be used to fake you. So say you're using a dating app. I'm not going to name any because that always makes me uncomfortable as a married woman. But what happens is, so you're a single person, or let's just assume you're a single person, you're using a dating app, you find this really beautiful woman that you connect with. You see this face here generated by ChatGPT, by AI. And you develop a relationship. Maybe you send some pictures you shouldn't send. Maybe you share some trade secrets from your business because you're talking about work. And it turns out that this is really a fake girl bot. And then the bad guy starts extorting you for money. So these are just some real world threats that are out there. And of course, there are many, many more. Like I said, we could spend an entire webinar just on this. So let's go to the next slide. This is an example of an attack. And I know there's a lot of words and arrows in the screen. It looks really complicated, but I'm going to explain it to you step by step. What we call this is an actor in the middle or a man in the middle attack. That's why we have this attacker here in the middle. There's no accident that he's in the middle. What this involves is something called a proxy and a reverse proxy server. All you need to understand this is a proxy server is a server that takes information from one server and forwards it to another server. And that is what a proxy is in its simplest terms. Another thing I want to point out on here is that if you look at the bottom to the 2 curvy arrows, that is stating we have a TLS encrypted connection. All you need to know about that is all of the communication between the user and the attacker and the target website is all encrypted. So the attacker cannot easily read that information unless they go through the process of decrypting it, which of course is possible with enough processing power, right? So this is what happens. We have a user. Let's say the user is Bob. Bob gets an email from Microsoft and it says, hey, Bob, your your account has been compromised. You better click on this link right this minute and change your password. So Bob panics, he hits the link, and then he goes, oh no, I just had security awareness training. And in that training, I learned that you don't click on links on email. You should not click on links on email unless you know the sender and are expecting something from them. And you can mouse over the link and see where it is taking you. Well, Bob panics. But then, because we have this actor in the middle, this proxy automatically forwards Bob's information to office.com, the correct office.com. So Bob goes, oh, ooh, I am in the right place. Life is good. I'm just going to keep on going. Now, in a real scenario, what you would do is if you got an email like this, you know how to access your Office account. Don't follow the link in the email. Go directly to your Office account and change your password there. So if this was a phishing email, worst case scenario, all you did was change your password. And we all know you're using multi-factor authentication and you are using and you're using a password manager that keeps those passwords for you. Ask me questions about that later. I'd love to go into that with you. So what happens is Bob ends up at the right site. He thinks life is good. Well, life is about to get really bad for Bob. So what happens when you have multi-factor authentication enabled and you go to office.com? It's going to prompt you for that multi-factor authentication code. And remind me later to tell you about all the ways MFA is not enough, because you truly have to have defense in depth. No one technology is ever going to save you. So the target site, office.com, prompts for his MFA credentials. The prompt goes through the proxy server, goes back to the user, prompts him. They pass along the MFA prompt. Bob opens his phone. He provides his little code. That code goes back to the target website. Up until this point, nothing has gone terribly wrong yet. Everything's encrypted. I wouldn't say it hasn't gone wrong at all, but it hasn't gone terribly wrong yet. So now that the phishing site forwards that MFA input to that target website, what happens is that target website creates something we call a session cookie. It's not chocolate chip. It's not super yummy. But what it is it is a way for that user to now for that attacker to now impersonate you. That session cookie, without doing any decryption or any fancy scripting or any fancy anything, now gives that attacker the right to be you. That attacker is you now, and they have gotten into your infrastructure, and then they can traverse through your infrastructure from that. Maybe doing something like, hey, I'm in Bob's email. Why don't I just send malware to everyone in Bob's address book? Or if he's connected to the global address book for the company, why don't I just send malware to everyone in the global address book? Now, when they look to see who the user is that sent me this email, it's Bob. I know Bob. I trust Bob. So I'm going to click on whatever Bob sends me. Remember when I said it has to be a sender you know, and you have to be expecting something from them. So then the phishing site redirects the user. It may be an error page, whatever, and the user just goes about their day and never realize they've just given the keys to the kingdom to a threat actor. Happy to explain this in more depth or more technically if anyone's interested. Okay, next slide. Remember when I said it's defense in depth? This is what defense in depth looks like. These are all the components. And not to say that there's not going to be additional components later. These are components. This does not cover all of the technology that you need to protect your environment. You're going to see some acronyms coming up later, and you may have more questions about any of these technologies. Next slide. So what is the minimum acceptable technology? Well, let me tell you, I think I alluded to it earlier, or I may have said it, who knows, that cybersecurity, as technical as I am, as much as I love technology, because I am a nerd, it's all about people, processes, and technology. You need all three to be safe. So what do you need? You need an incident response plan. An incident response plan is a paper plan. As much as I hate paper, you want to print this baby. You want to print this, you want to practice it, you want to know before the threat happens, before the bad thing happens, how you're going to react, what you're going to do. Multi-factor authentication. Is multi-factor authentication the end all be all? No, we need defense in depth. We need many different things to protect us. Endpoint detection and response. Simplest way to think about this is what is on our workstation or our laptop, and that is what protects the end user and detects bad behavior and stops it in its tracks. Security information and event management system. This uses multiple things, threat intelligence, security operations centers, to look at information from your entire infrastructure. Doesn't matter if your infrastructure is in the cloud, doesn't matter if it's local, it ties all of that, correlates it all back together to help protect. So EDR is the workstation, SIM is the greater network architecture. And when you add the M in front of these, that means manage, that means you're including a security operations center. And then the last one is backups. Now, backups is part of an entire category of business continuity and disaster recovery. But those backups, just like you practice your incident response plan, I want you to practice your backups. What does that mean? That means I want you to test that they're working. And because your backups are only as good as the last time you tested them, your incident response plan is only as good as the last time you practiced it. And guess what? If you want cybersecurity insurance, you better have these things. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to my friend Chris Conradi, and he will take it from here.
Thanks, Natalie. I think that previous screen that you were just showing is really an important visual for stratifying the importance of where cybersecurity insurance actually sits in how you prioritize your total cybersecurity strategy. The insurance is the last line of defense. You know, sometimes people say, well, I'm buying this insurance so I don't have to do these other things. And that is really a misstep in the way of thinking through why we do the security. The security is so that we never need the insurance, because if we've called the claim intake hotline to say we've been phished, we do not know what the extent of our exposure is, PII, PHI, or whatever the case would be. That means all else has failed. And now we're really just relying upon an insurance company and a financial indemnification product to start fixing massive problems that are upon us. So the insurance is the last line of defense. It is not something that we buy so that we can neglect implementing controls. I do think that is an important thing to reiterate. So what I've done here is just taken some cut and paste sections from these applications. One of the things that I think is interesting is watching the evolution and the exponential growth of these applications over the last 10 years. I've been in the insurance business about 15 years, so that's been enough time to sort of see the initial genesis of generation one cyber insurance policies and how they've evolved. And we've literally gone from half-page applications to 12 and 13-page applications, because as the threat actors become more sophisticated and as the attacks evolve to, you know, get out in front of whatever in mass security controls we all implement as a business community, you can bet that the criminals are always, you know, saying, well, they've done the multi-factor authentication on the remote accessibility. They've done the multi-factor authentication on the email accounts, maybe even the desktop logins. We are seeing more insurance companies require multi-factor authentication on the backups themselves. And as we do all of these things, the criminals are going to have to evolve their approach. And that's at least one reason why the insurance is so important, because we are inherently always playing catch up to whatever the criminals are doing. So when it comes to these minimum standards of insurability, and Natalie did an excellent job listing those 5 things. I mean, as we currently stand, there are a handful of things that if we're not doing, I simply cannot help my clients get quality cyber insurance any longer. And the first is multi-factor authentication, especially as it relates to remote accessibility. Yes, next slide, please, John. Internal security controls. Can your users access email through a web application or a non-corporate device? If yes, we need to get that behind MFA. Do you use MFA to secure all remote access to your network? That is a non-negotiable at this point. If remote accessibility is allowable without a second layer of authentication, do not pass go. I cannot get that cyber application underwritten any longer. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, John. Thank you. Backup and recovery policies. Anymore the carriers are asking, and again, these are questions directly from the application. Do you use a data backup solution? We're hopeful the answer is yes. We're hopeful that those backups are encrypted. We now are seeing some carriers in certain industries say beyond encryption, we want those things air gapped. I mean, that's getting old school, like whose job was it to take the tape drive home at night 25 years ago? Now we're saying we actually want the backups off the network. And that is because the cyber criminals, they are prioritizing the corruption of those backups as a way of holding you ransom when you have fallen for their phishing scam and they have infiltrated your network. They know that if they control your backups, you are going to have to pay them, and so they want to know how we are now controlling backups. So if in your last cyber insurance renewal this was not heavily reiterated, expect that to be something that is emphasized in the future. The encryption of the backups, the air gapping of the backups, be ready for that. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then your cyber technology stack. One of the things that I think I'm an insurance broker. I sell hundreds of cyber insurance policies. I've become pretty adept at understanding what a lack of controls will mean for underwriting, whether it means we cannot get you underwritten at all, or maybe the favorability of terms will be impacted by loose or light controls. But whether you are a CFO or a CEO of a company working with even a relatively sophisticated insurance broker, these applications themselves have sort of transcended what reasonably bright people not working every day in network security or information technology can kind of grasp and understand what's going on. The acronyms that are being shot at us are literally multiplying every year. And, so having a quality partner is important. If you're a large enough organization to have a CIO, you want to make sure that that person is helping you with the completion of this cyber application. Absent of on staff, on team, IT professionals, you want to make sure you're working with a quality MSP, a managed services provider that can help you understand what you do and don't have as you complete these cyber applications. Again, because accurately conveying to the underwriter what it is you have will affect your terms and conditions, but it might also impact the obligation that the carrier has to you when you've had an event. Something that would otherwise be covered by the insurance could be jeopardized if something was answered incorrectly and you were underwritten in a way that assumed you had controls that maybe you don't actually have. And so it's very important that someone with all of the competency in this space helps you with this with the cyber insurance application. Again, the cyber insurance being the last line of defense. Let's move to the next slide. The text on this screen is kind of small, but I think it's indicative of what a quality and comprehensive cyber insurance policy looks like. So on the left-hand side of this screen, you will see a lot of limits tied to certain insuring agreements that say $2 million, and maybe in some cases those are sub-limited. Not all cyber insurance is created equal. Not all cyber insurance is designed to respond to a sophisticated phishing attack or ransomware event, or maybe even a financial loss that you have been affected by due to a phishing attack. So when we see these policies, there's a few things that you want to kind of have your eyes drawn to. You want to make sure that you have true cyber insurance, not an endorsement to a general liability policy that provides you with some response for a data breach or maybe even some liability coverage for a data breach. Certainly those are important. In this case, this policy includes $2 million of security and privacy liability coverage. Those are the dollars that we have if someone says our negligence in managing the data or not having correct controls or security is why there has been a breach. Those that believe they have been negatively or financially impacted by that breach could sue us, and this is the coverage that we have to defend ourselves. You'll see in the first party insuring agreements, breach event costs and coverage. Also, within that $2 million aggregate limit, it's important that we have robust liability and event response, because this is the coverage that we have for all of the regulatory requirements of notifying those that have been impacted by our breach. So we have $2 million of liability, $2 million of event cost coverage, very important. You also see something called dependent system failure coverage. In the world of cyber insurance, that is where you get business interruption coverage. So, you might have a broker that pores over your financial statements with you and helps you identify the appropriate limit of business income or interruption insurance related to or tornado or a fire or something like that. Start thinking about how your business could be financially impacted by a large or prolonged network outage. If you are a manufacturing business and your machines are connected to the internet and now all of a sudden you cannot produce because you are under ransom, you're losing money. Does your cyber insurance policy have an adequate business interruption limit for the exposure that you have there? Extortion. Your policy's ability to pay a large ransom demand is important. Just this year, clients of ours have had to pay multiple ransoms, always in crypto. So you have to use a third-party vendor to help you make that payment. But your policy, if correctly written, has the ability to indemnify you for those types of payments. And then phishing, fraud, sublimits. If you do fall victim to a phishing scheme that has put you in a position where you have given away your own money as a result of trickery, quality cyber policies will have some limit of insurance for those types of things as well. So again, not all cyber insurance policies are created equal. The cyber insurance policy is always the last line of defense. It's when all else has failed that we get this stack of papers out and find out exactly what we have. And we need to make sure that this stack of papers actually comprehensively covers the types of things that are happening today. Some people say, well, how much insurance should I have? According to an annual IBM cost of a data breach study that they conduct in 2022, the aggregate breach costs broken down on a per record basis were $164. So if you have data on employees, customers, patients, vendors, if it is personally identifying, you have a record that may require you to certain laws, both state and federal, or in other states, as Natalie mentioned, because if you're doing business in other states, you'll be subject to the laws of those states. And so if you maintain 10,000 identifying records, you can kind of extrapolate what that type of exposure would be at $164 a record on an average basis. So that's one way to back into limit adequacy. You may want to look at your business income exposure as you just determine cyber insurance limit adequacy. But there are a number of ways that you should be proactively consulted with by an insurance professional to determine limit adequacy after you have worked with information technology professionals to determine if you have correct network security controls. And then let's look at the next slide, John. Something that is on every cyber insurance application now is a warranty statement. And essentially, this is the last thing that you will see before you sign your name to these cyber insurance applications, which is everything I've told you is truthful. Everything I've told you is accurate. And it's really kind of a get out of jail card for the underwriter, that if we've told them we have controls that we do not have, it absolutely can affect their response or obligation to you under the policy when it comes time for you to go through the claim experience. So if we are aspirational, like, oh, we intend to have those controls that this application is asking us about in the next 30 to 60 days, so let's just go ahead and say yes, I would caution you that that may be a poor decision. And so first and foremost, let's answer these questions truthfully. If we are still working on controls that would be required by a particular cyber insurer, we have the ability to dialogue with them and maybe even have, you know, a dispensation or an accommodation made for a period of time. And, or we may need to find a different cyber insurer that is not yet requiring that security control. But answering truthfully is important because it can affect the obligation that your carrier has to you at the time of claim. And that's the last thing I want to leave you with.
Well, thank you, Chris, Natalie, for all of that information. That was very insightful. So I wanted to highlight again on this slide that Natalie had gone over. There's a lot of different components here. And so one thing that I've experienced is when businesses are taking this journey into cybersecurity resilience, what is it that they need to do? So my recommendation for you, and typically what we do here at DOS, is we do a security assessment. And what the security assessment does is it's not just a, hey, you have these vulnerabilities, you have these issues. It's also more of looking and identifying what are the risks for your business. What is acceptable risk? Let me put it that way, because there are a lot of different risks that are out there, but you have to identify for your business what is going to be the most prominent, what is probably going to be the most likely avenue a hacker is going to get in. You know, right now, what we're seeing with real world scenarios is email is being targeted very heavily. It has been for many years, and it will continue to be so. Because why? Well, it's a very easy and low cost avenue for hackers to take to, like Natalie said, it's a spray and pray, right? They can distribute that to hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals in a very small amount of time, and either further their expansion into a phishing attempt or campaign, or breach into your network. So again, there's a lot of things that are out there. For you, what I recommend first is get a security assessment. You can do that with whoever your current MSP is. If you don't have an MSP or you don't have an IT department, DOS is happy to offer this up for you, or get with your internal IT team and have them conduct one of these. It'll be very vital for your business, and it'll help you identify any gaps that you may have, or what types of things you guys currently have within your cybersecurity stack. So with that, I'm going to go ahead to the next slide here and open it up to any Q&A. So I see a couple of questions here. Does cyber insurance cover physical breaches of any sort, or social engineering breaches? Chris or Natalie, would you be able to answer that one?
I can speak to that, and I'd like to. The answer is yes. A quality cyber insurance policy covers physical breaches as well. We think of cyber insurance as a clandestine hack, or someone using network infiltration has compromised data, and now we're subject to state and federal laws around self-report or disclosing to individuals that they've been exposed. These policies also cover the improper discarding of paper records, or something like that. So yeah, if the breach is physical, like a unforced error on our own part, where we've not managed hard assets like paper, or even mobile hard drives or USB thumb drives, or devices such as phones or laptops that are left places and we just can't confirm that the data has been left safe on those, yes, the policy will cover breaches that are not network infiltrated, that are physical in nature. And I hope that answers your question. Again, a quality cyber policy, and so because there's not, in so many other areas of the insurance industry where there's been hundreds of years in these forms maturing to a somewhat uniform place, I would say that cyber insurance is not yet there. So there is disparity within the world of cyber insurance today, and but a correctly written and quality cyber insurance policy should cover physical breaches. So if we need to review a policy for you or something like that, please let us do that at no cost or obligation. The other thing that you've asked is social engineering breaches, and the answer to that is yes. If you want to go back, John, maybe just arrow back to that page that showed some of the declarations and limits on a cyber insurance policy.
One more.
Yeah, so
there we go.
Yeah, think of the cyber crime coverage insuring section of this policy as being sort of the AKA social engineering section of the policy. So financial fraud sublimit of $250,000, telecommunications and utilities fraud sublimit of $250,000. These are limits, by the way. Your phishing fraud loss limit is $250,000, and client phishing fraud loss limit of $100,000. These are the limits that we have if you have been socially engineered, whether someone has tricked you into giving away your own money through a fake invoicing scam, or some other, I'm the president of the company and I need you to wire this money, on a Saturday afternoon to, I don't know. I mean, we've all received these, and I think most people.
It still happens.
Yeah.
It still happens today.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we say you have to have people, process, and technology, because in that case, what's failed you is you don't have the correct processes in place or the right training for your people. And that's why you lose money through a wire fraud scam.
Yeah. So yeah, we do have coverage for those. And we've paid those claims a lot. And I wish there were larger limits available than $100,000 and $250,000 in the industry today. For small and medium-sized businesses, that would be considered a very robust limit. So
yeah.
Great. And that actually leads into another great question here. If a client of somebody or a vendor is the one that gets breached, does my cyber insurance cover that? I myself did not get breached as a company or an employee, but somebody that I was working with did get breached, and I happen to be part of that.
We are starting to see more of that in these next generation policies, John. That was not something that we saw a lot of a couple of years ago, but now, the chain reaction of having fallen for a phish is really possible. It's like I've fallen for this, and now it just shot out to my entire address book, and maybe a half a dozen people there have now fallen for it. And that sort of chain reaction, if someone were to come back and say that your negligence is why this has happened on our end, we are seeing policies that now have the ability to respond to that financially if it comes to that.
You know what else I've seen, Chris, is that if I've seen some cases where if the insurance company can prove that it happened because of negligence on your part, that they're trying to deny claims. I'm sure that's going to go to court. That's a news story that I just saw. But it's what we call those those clickers, those people who can't help themselves but to click on everything. And, part of the people part is having a culture of cybersecurity, so that if someone does click on something they shouldn't have, that they're comfortable reporting to you that they did, so you can minimize that damage. Because if you have people who are doing, you shouldn't punish somebody because they clicked on something one time. We've all done it. I mean, I'm pointing fingers at myself. We've all done it. And it's because you don't take your own advice. It's because you didn't slow down. You didn't really read. You didn't pay attention to where it came from. and we're just in such a rush today as society. If we would just take a couple minutes just to slow down. I think you quoted, you quoted the IBM cost of a data breach. The other report that I use is the Verizon data breach investigations report. And they state that 75% of cyber incidents are caused by a human error. Now, that human error could be a configuration error. It could be a human clicking on an email. And that's actually down a little bit from the last report. It went from 82% to 75%. So maybe our security awareness training is getting better. And I think that's something that people discount. But you have to have that culture, and you have to build it by having things like cybersecurity training and phishing training. You have to build it by people not being afraid to say, hey, I made a mistake.
Yeah, I'll kind of put my humble hat on. In the last week, I have fallen for one of the security awareness trainings at my office. I got an email that indicated I had a credit with Airbnb, and I thought, well, how handy is that? And
I always advise people not to do those because those are mean.
Yeah, I clicked on the link and it said, oops, you weren't supposed to do that, and I know that I'll get to deal with that later in a group
training.
meeting. Yeah. So, and
Awesome.
I am as skeptical and cynical as anyone I know, but they got me with that. So, yeah.
They can cover them up pretty well. Got another question here. I think this one's a good one to ask to get the group's opinion here. What is an incident, let me rephrase this a little bit. What does a good incident response plan look like?
Okay, that's super easy because there are great resources out on the web, and I would not advise you to take one of these and use it and not consult this with a professional, because you should work with a trusted advisor or someone who's smart in cyber, but it could give you a good start. NIST offers copies, DHS offers copies, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency offers copies. So some of the guidance I would give is what that plan is really to think about, what do I do if someone gets on my infrastructure? What is my first step? Who is the first person I call? And when I say person, I don't mean for you to identify a person's name. I mean for you to identify a role. Is the first person I call? Typically, it's one of three, or three at the same time if you have enough people. It's usually your cybersecurity insurance provider, your cybersecurity insurance stack provider, and your attorney. Those are typically the first three people you call. Now, you can argue about which order it should go in. I would lean honestly towards, I think the attorney would be last. It's kind of a toss up between your cyber insurance plan and whoever your provider is of those services, because they're going to work together. One thing you want to make sure of is that is a crime scene. If you think you have had an incident, that is a crime scene. Think of it this way. Don't touch anything. Unplug yourself from the network. Do not, I repeat, do not shut down, because you could destroy forensic evidence. This is a crime scene. You don't touch it anymore. You wouldn't touch a dead body. You don't touch touch a computer that's been involved in an incident, right? I mean, I don't touch dead bodies. Not that I've seen any, but I wouldn't touch one. And then you want to identify what the roles are of the people in your company and what they should do. So again, roles, not people. HR, head of security, head of IT, CEO, marketing. What should their steps be? You want to outline how communication should happen. The last thing on earth you want to happen is to have a possible incident and then have someone call your company and your secretary goes, oh yeah, there was an incident. We can't help you right now. You want to cover things like that, right? Typically, and Chris, this may be a place where you can weigh in my experience, when you have cyber insurance, really it's all coordinated by the cyber insurance carrier. They may have their own teams that come in.
One of the things I like to I think this relates to the next question we got. That's like, once we've been breached, what is the first thing we should do? So I think we can kind of answer everything together here. But yeah, I mean, that's what a cyber insurance policy is. It's a financial funding mechanism for the vendors that have been procured by the cyber insurance company to respond to the breach. So you will see, and there's getting to be a handful of these companies that do the triage and initial response to a breach, and they're paid for by the carrier that wrote you the policy and that will indemnify that work. And usually those vendors have agreed to discounted rates because they're going to get a lot of business from Travelers or Chubb or Tokyo or any of these large cyber insurers. And that's kind of how that works, is that is already been agreed to by those vendors and this particular insurance company, that they're sort of ready at your beck and call, and they will be paid for by the limit of insurance that you selected working with your insurance broker. And this other question that we got here, once we know for sure we have been breached, what is the first thing we should do? Most insurance policies, including cyber insurance, have provisions or requirements within them about timely reporting of claims.
Yes.
So time is of the essence if you believe you have something that would be defined as a claim within the policy. So you don't want to put a lot of time between your knowledge of an event and when you let your cyber insurance company know, because it could impact coverage. And a day or two, or some reasonable period of time, that's all sort of within the realm of acceptability. We start getting 60 days down the road, and we tried to self-manage this thing, and now it's mushroomed out of control, and you think,
bad idea.
Oh, I thought this was going to stay within our deductible, and now it sort of hasn't. So now let's call in the cavalry, our cyber insurer, and they say, wait, you've been self-managing this for 42 days because there
You
are
just touched that dead body.
there are a half dozen things that we would have done diametrically differently than what you've done, and so now we don't want to we want to show you the timely reporting provision within your policy now.
It's a couple days is good. The sooner the better is what we recommend here.
I would say a couple days is too long,
but it's still probably too long. So I got a follow-up question too, and I get this quite a bit. So let's say I'm experiencing a phishing attempt, and I fall for it. Now, like Natalie says, you don't want to do anything, but what if I need to change my password? Is that acceptable to be able to do as a response?
Use a different device. Use your phone to change your password.
Gotcha.
Use something else. I really, and that's advice that's come from cyber insurance carriers and incident response teams, people who are down in the weeds with their hands in. You don't touch it. The FBI will tell you don't touch it. Law enforcement will tell you don't touch it.
Gotcha. Because what I've always been told is we want to make sure that, if the hacker's actively into somebody's email system, we at least want to get them out of the system. So that way, at least we can mitigate their footprint, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
that's why, again, you want to have that cyber culture thing. I mean, a bad guy can do a lot of damage in 24 to 48 hours.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
even in 10 minutes nowadays.
Yeah, because
it doesn't take
automated.
long. So yeah, that's always a question I get too, of, what do I need to do? Is it okay to at least do this, or should I call them before I figure out what I need to do?
Exactly.
And I say, well, if you want to, definitely want to get your password changed. So let's get in, change your password, get them kicked out at least, so that way they
or even
aren't expanding that.
Change it, have you do a password reset for them.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's what we'll do. We'll change it from the administrative side on our end, so that way,
but we don't in that email account. Maybe they shouldn't be touching it right now. Maybe you should just do a password reset, and that should be it. The last thing on earth you want to do is destroy forensic evidence. So if I could just interject a little story here. So we did have a client who did have an incident, and this client was in healthcare. So they do have a lot of strict regulations that they have to abide by. But not only do you need these tools like endpoint detection and response and SIM to protect your environment, even if you're not in healthcare, is because they can actually be used to prove that something didn't happen. So under HIPAA, they have to report if they have a data breach, if they lose control, if a bad guy accesses personal health information, they have to report it. They have to pay fines, and they show up on a public website hosted by Health and Human Services. Well, in this case, the bad guy did get into their system, but they were able to prove, because they had those EDR logs and they had those SIM logs, that the bad guy never touched any PHI, never got to it. And because of that, they didn't have a reportable incident. So they may have still had to engage with their insurance carrier, but that is a huge win if you have that culture where you're able to get in there and mitigate this right away and stop a bad guy in their tracks, and they don't get access to that information that they shouldn't have access to. You that saved that company a ton of dollars, which could have put them under.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I know we're getting short on time here. I do have one more question that I would like to ask here. So let's say we have a work computer that is insured under my cyber policy, and I have all the different cybersecurity protections that I should have, for my policy, but I get hacked because I go to a public Wi-Fi somewhere, say Starbucks or McDonald's, or I'm at a conference and I'm at a hotel Wi-Fi and I get breached that way. Is that still covered under our insurance policy?
Yes, if being off of your home network and on someone else's network is a contributing cause for the breach, that should not jeopardize your coverage. I will add, with even the rudimentary understanding of network security controls that I have, that being off your home network should not negate the controls that you've put in place, whether it be multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, and all of the email controls that you have. Those should not be network specific controls. Am I understanding that correctly, Natalie?
You are correct. However, if you are a road warrior and you are frequently connecting to hotel Wi-Fi and public Wi-Fi, you should be using a Wi-Fi hotspot. You really should not be connecting to public Wi-Fi. You're just inviting something to happen, because bad guys have a great imagination.
And they're getting very clever.
They are very clever, and they're sharing their cleverness with others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, this concludes our cybersecurity insurance webinar today. Thank you everybody for attending. We have a recording of this session, so we will keep that for anybody that was unable to attend but did register. We will send you a copy of that recording. We will also send follow-up contact information. So if you have any additional questions after this, or anything that pops up, or you want to learn more about cyber insurance, or maybe look at a security assessment, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to help. And thank you again, Chris and Natalie, for being a contributor to our event today. We greatly appreciate it. Hope everybody has a wonderful day, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.